Stephen Brown.
Spell
Stevenbrown.
Stephen, what would your title be if I were to give you a title? Would we say retired military? Would we say single father? What would you want us to do?
Well, both of those are good.
Okay.
I mean, but I was not, I would say single father. Yeah.
Would we say recent Kiev resident? Am I pronouncing it right?
You are Kiev.
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 Would I say
Kiev.
recent Kiev president?
And
Or-
it is an interesting distinction in that you've probably seen the Russian spelling versus the Ukrainian spelling and how it's gone to Kiev, K-Y-I-V, Kiev. Yeah, that is correct to say I'm a recent Kiev resident, very recent. I technically still am. I have my lease. My lease is still active. Our apartment's still there, and all our things are still in it. So we could go back tomorrow if there were a way in.
Am I exaggerating if I say this is a crazy story? Your story? Is it a crazy story?
It feels like a dream, I guess you would say, more nightmare. But I mean, there are aspects of it that were really good, but yeah, it feels surreal. It feels dreamlike, almost, that the whole thing happened and that I'm here talking to you. So. Yeah.
So give me a Reader's Digest version, roughly, of like what the impetus to go there and all that jazz.
Well, I retired from the military in 2007. I spent some time as a Russian linguist for the military. At least I was getting proficient enough to be a Russian linguist. So following my retirement, I moved to Russia for a year. Just to work on my language abilities, my accent, and had a son born in St. Petersburg during my time living there. So as it turned out, I became a single dad in 2008, and my son and I, because my visa expired in Russia, my son and I moved back, and we've spent the first 12 years of his life here, right here in Colorado, mostly in Highlands Ranch. And as about COVID hit, we decided we wanted to give him an opportunity to go back to Russia and experience life there. And his heritage on his mother's side is from that area of the world. So we were going to move back over there for a year and just let him live there for a year. But then COVID hit and we couldn't go. And then we couldn't go to Russia at all because of visa restrictions. And we ended up deciding on Kiev. Once COVID restrictions lightened, we ended up deciding on going to Kiev for 12 months and just letting him go to school there and experience this cultural broadening thing, you would say. So, and that was that. We thought it was going to be 1 year, but it turned out we were there 8 months, and Putin had other plans for us, and out we came. So
I want to fast forward to that.
Yeah.
You're there. Well, how was it there for your son? Well, I mean, did you guys? Would you want to expose him to?
My son has both American and Russian nationalities, passports, and at the time we left, he didn't know anything about Russian culture, he didn't speak any Russian, hardly at all. I do speak reasonable / fluent Russian, so he's heard me speak it with Russian friends, but he didn't speak any himself. So that was kind of the goal for me, to allow him to experience that culture and to learn to kind of throw him into the fire of learning to speak. And yeah, so that was primarily why we were there.
Literally threw him into the fire.
Yeah, and he learned fast. He's a smart boy, and he was learning. His teachers were impressed. Now, he had heard Russian on and off, so it wasn't totally something that was Greek to him. He had heard the words. He had seen me watch movies sometimes in Russian, and so maybe for that reason it gelled with him really quickly, and his teachers were impressed. But he started speaking reasonably well, and he could order his own food, and he could get around, and he could go up and ask questions of the store personnel or whatever. So yeah, he came right along, and we were doing well. So
if you were to show me pictures of what you guys did, I mean, what kind of pictures did you take there? Just like at the school, or what kind of pictures, if you were to share them, what would they be?
Well, we were there for about a month or 2 months prior, so we saw all the tourist sites you're supposed to see, and there's a lot to see in Kiev. We went to the circus, we went to Lavra, which is the very old church underground. So, yeah, there's the river there. There's all the things you can do. The sites you can see. We have all the obligatory pictures from those kinds of tourist attractions. So. Then we settled into our apartment and kind of started trying to make a life for ourselves. We have pictures from our apartment. My son was showing them to somebody. We were on the 20th floor, and he wanted to be up high. So we have pictures from outside of our window. It turned out to be kind of crazy because we only found out later there were no stairs in our building. There were 3 elevators, and we asked the question, what happens if the power goes out? And we were always told, oh, don't worry, the power will not go out. And there's 3 elevators, and they're always working. They're really reliable. But our concern on the 24th was, what if Putin hits the power grid? We would have been stuck on the 20th floor, and we knew that. But yeah, so we do have pictures from our apartment. I have some pictures of my son in his little uniform. They had to wear uniforms at the British school, which he actually liked. And so yeah, we have those kinds of pictures too.
All right, so now we're going to talk about, on my drive over here, I called it the 100 hours.
Yeah, yeah.
Basically, it was 100
Yeah, it was 100 from the time we exited our apartment with our suitcases in hand till we were in our hotel here in Hanens Ranch. So it was a crazy long 100 hours.
So take me to the time when you're like, something's going on. You know, I've been watching the news, like you explained to me, things are happening to the point where, like, okay, I could hear bombing from our apartment. Did I hear that right? You heard bombing from the
apartment? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Talk to me about that experience and how it all...
Well, I had probably 2 weeks prior, we had bought airline tickets out. And within 4 hours of our buying the airline tickets, the news had totally flip-flopped and changed to peace is inevitable. So we canceled their airline tickets. And that process happened a couple of times. And then toward the end, there was, I think, a 3rd time we actually did buy tickets. But then KLM stopped flying, so they kind of got pulled out from under us. And then Lufthansa followed suit and stopped flying. And then it became impossible to get out via airline. By the time I knew that, I bought bus tickets, and that was on the 22nd of February. And it became more clear that something really was going to happen, because the previous month and even previous 2 weeks, nobody believed there that anything was going to happen. Nobody believed it, and I didn't believe it. And my son and I mean, because of his school and we had kind of a commitment there. I had a lease on an apartment. We were trying to stick it out. But it became, toward the end, right before it happened, more and more clear that it was going to happen. So I bought the bus tickets on the 22nd for the 24th. And I remember we went to bed on the night of the 23rd with everything crossed, just saying, no war, no war, no war. We just got to get to our bus and get out. So, but the morning of the 24th, I woke at 5:30 to the sound of explosions, and it was clear what they were. So, and I knew, we waited too long. So that's when it started.
Did you hear the sirens then? When did you hear this?
The bombs were first, and I got up, and there was a moment of panic, and I went to check the news, and I didn't even need to check the news because I already knew what was happening. These were clearly explosions and loud explosions, although they were not close to me. But so the air raid siren probably started half an hour later, and it was that sound will stick with me longer than the bombs itself, because it was like we'd been dropped into a World War II movie. Like I said, it was just a surreal, this can't be happening kind of sound, and what am I supposed to be doing kind of sound. But yeah, they started about half an hour later and went off maybe every half hour for a while. Yeah, this started about 5:20 in the morning, and that started it. And we knew our suitcases were already packed and sitting by the door, but our tickets weren't till midnight. So here our tickets were. It's 5:30 in the morning, and so yeah, that's
almost 24 hours.
we didn't have COVID test. Now we were vaccinated, but the rule was to get on the bus, you had to show a COVID test taken within 24, 48 hours. I can't remember. And I had a stack of Ukrainian money that was, I don't know, 60,000 hryvnia, I think, which is about a little over $2,000. But so we had two tasks for that morning, and that was get our money exchanged and get our COVID test and get to the bus station early. And of course, all that went to heck because everything was closed. We couldn't exchange our money anywhere. We couldn't find a COVID test anywhere. So it got to be about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. There were no taxis working. There was nothing. So we knew we were actually lucky in that we were only an hour's walk from the bus station. So we just said, let's take our suitcases and go. We just wanted to get to the bus station. We didn't know if the bus station would be closed. We didn't know if there would be fist fights for seats going on, or we didn't know. So we just wanted to get to the bus station, and we did, and we got there about 4 o'clock, and it was open, and there were buses running, and we just felt more comfortable getting in there and sitting down or standing up, whatever. We just felt more comfortable being there at the bus station. But we sit there maybe 4 hours, and we got a text message from the bus company that our bus had been delayed to the following day. And we said, oh boy, by the following day the Russians will have the city encircled and we aren't going anywhere. So that was our thought, and we just got hit with a 13 hours from when we got the notification was when our bus was supposed to go out the next morning. And yeah, we didn't have our COVID test. We were just sitting there hoping, and yeah, we got hit with that delay. So.
And that delay came true. That was.
It did, and we didn't even know until later, much later. There was no reason given. We didn't know until much later that there was a quarantine place from 12 to 8, and that there was no movement allowed. That was why our bus was canceled. We didn't find that out until we were in Poland. But so we had to decide: sit at the bus station for 13 hours, or go back to our apartment and just be there. The risk to go back to our apartment, it was on the 20th floor, and like I told you, if the power was cut, the elevators would go out and we would have been stuck on our apartment. So we couldn't stand sitting at the bus station for 13 hours, so we just went back to our apartment. But the next morning at 4:30, there was a very loud explosion, much louder than day one. It was clearly closer and seemed bigger. I felt the shock wave from that one. So
does that mean within a mile, within 2 miles?
It's really hard to tell. I'm going to say I would say maybe 5 or 10 miles. Okay. But it was clearly a big explosion, big enough to where I felt the shock wave from it. So from that point, I got up and I woke my son up and I said, let's just get to the bus station. So there we were again, trekking to the bus station with our suitcases, and an hour walk. Actually, we went down and used the metro that day, but the metros it was creepy because anybody who could fit in the metro was stations underground, was down there, people sleeping on the cement, pieces of foam, whatever, kids, dogs, cats, pets, everybody was down under in the metro stations. But yeah, we hopped the metro over to one metro over and got to our bus station, and yeah.
What was the bus station like? I'm envisioning like packed people.
It was packed with people, and as I walked in that next morning, it was I don't know, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and I went and checked the board, and buses were still running, and I didn't know if they would be, and we were of course scared in that regard, but I went and checked the board, and our bus wasn't shown on the board, and my heart kind of sank, and I'm like, oh my gosh, our bus isn't on the board. So what else could we do? We just walked outside and waited, and sure enough, it showed up. And And the bus driver got off, a gruff old bus driver, and he was saying, "This is the one from last night. You have to have a ticket from last," because people were trying to get on, and we kind of pushed forward and had our tickets and got on. And talk about a wave of relief. There actually was a bus, and we were sitting on it. So as we were sitting there, the air raid sirens were going off, and we heard a couple explosions in the distance, but man, just all kudos go to Econolines of, you know, they were getting people out, whereas the airlines had pulled out and stopped, and, you know, the reasons for pulling out, and, you know, they were saying was protection of their customers, but, you know, we were their customers there. So now granted, once Russia had declared a no-fly zone over, you know, they had every right to stop, but there were days before that they could have kept bringing people out, and they didn't. But the buses kept going. My hat's off to them, and we'll forever be thankful that they did. And we got on our bus, but we sit there well past the departure time, and we just kept saying, "Are we going to make it? Are we going to make it?" When the bus finally started moving again, another wave of relief that, oh my gosh, we're moving. Until we realized we made it just out onto the road. And it took us 8 hours to get to the edge of Kiev. Because the roads were packed, and we were moving feet at a time.
Oh, because the traffic.
Yeah. It was like a zombie apocalypse, you know.
So you said something early on that kind of struck me as I talked to you over the phone, and right now very calculated, methodical, Stephen. But you said panic. What's panic look like for you? Like when you had to wake up your son, or
I guess I'm not a panic person because I felt a little panic on the inside, but I didn't want to let him see it. So I knew we had to get out of our apartment because the power could go down any minute and we'd be stuck there. And like I had told you before, nobody thought this was going to happen, and I didn't think it was going to happen. I had employed all my military analyst skills to the task, and I was sure it wasn't going to happen. We had accumulated enough water to get us through 2 or 3 weeks, I think. Enough peanut butter to get us through 2 or 3 weeks, but we didn't want to get trapped in that apartment. I had my moments of panic that the elevators are going to stop running and we'll be stuck, or the buses won't be running. But my son, you know, I think he might have felt it too, but we weren't letting each other see it, right? So we were both, you know, kind of staying a little strong for each other. And that was that.
Okay, so you make it through the Kiev traffic for 8 hours. You get to the edge of.
Yeah.
And then so the bus continues on. Tell me, like when you're on the bus, are you seeing anything that resembles a war? Or are you seeing?
Oh yeah. During the 8 hours out of Kiev, and they were grueling because sometimes we would move a little. We would check our GPS app, right, on the phone, and it would be like, we haven't moved at all, right? We're still at the bus station. It's been 3 hours. So it was horrible in that sense, but we did pass through a corridor of where tanks were on the side of the road, and we weren't even sure which side of tanks. We thought the possibility was really high that we would be stopped by Russian forces at some point. You know, they would go through the bus. But we saw tanks. It turned out to be Ukrainian. We didn't know until we got close enough to see the patches on the soldiers. And so they were guarding the western exit toward Poland. You know, when you see the tanks and soldiers on the side of the road, that lent a feeling of reality to it. So.
All right, so you get out of Kiev, you're on the bus ride, and then you make it to the border, I guess, after a while?
Yeah, well, another 10 hours. But we knew every time the bus come to a dead stop that we'd made it to a gas station, right? And gas stations were just backed up and out into the road and packed, and everybody trying to get the last drops of gas into their cars. And we knew when we came to a dead stop, we're at a gas station. There goes an hour as we try to get past that. And then we would move for a ways and another gas station. So yeah, after 10 hours more, we made it to the border of Poland. And that was about midnight, I think, 12:30, 1 in the morning. And as we got to the border of Poland, our bus driver actually pulled into the oncoming traffic lane and passed mile after mile, because the right lane leading to the exit was just packed. I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 lanes wide, plus they had made another lane off on the edge of the road, and it was just packed. And we drove past probably 3 or 4 or 5 miles of cars with him in the oncoming traffic lane, which a couple other buses, I think they were allowing buses to do that, to pull into the oncoming traffic. And we must have passed, 4 or 5 miles of cars and got to what felt like should have been up near the checkpoint, near the border to leave Ukraine. And then we came to a dead stop, and we didn't move again. We moved 10 feet after about an hour, and then we moved another 10 feet, but then we sit there for 8 hours. And again, it was the midnight to 8 can't move rule that we had no idea, nobody was talking about it, and we didn't know why we were sitting 8 hours. My son was annoyed by it, but there we were sitting 8 hours just waiting for the movement to be allowed.
And that's
again.
Just, whose rule is that, Poland or?
Ukraine's. We were still in Ukraine.
Oh.
We had not exited out of Ukraine yet, so.
And is that a war rule? Or what?
It was, I understand it was a military curfew was enacted, no movement between midnight to 8 a.m. So we only found that out after we got into Poland, and somebody else on the bus said, oh yeah, that was a military curfew. They weren't allowed to move during that. And it was torturous, because we could have almost thrown a rock into Poland at that point, but we couldn't move, and we were stuck there. And we were stuck on that bus all night, just waiting. So, and I had told you earlier that it was about 12:30 or 1 o'clock, and they started just opening the bus doors and letting people on, mothers with little kids, and our bus packed, standing room only, the aisles, anywhere you could put somebody, they were on just to keep warm. And there was no sleeping, because there were cell phones going off, people crying, babies screaming. But for every woman and child who got on, you could see her husband push her on the bus, kiss her goodbye, and he went one way, and in tears they got on, and we're going the other way. So
The men were going to go defend.
they couldn't leave. They had enacted a rule that no man between 18 and 60 was allowed, Ukrainian man was allowed to leave. So yeah, they checked our bus before we left Kiev. They come on and they checked passports, and they took a few people off, but our U.S. passports got us out of there. So.
And so you cross the border eventually, you get into Poland, and you get on a plane, and you go?
We all the delays were getting out of Ukraine, getting stamped out and our passport out of Ukraine. And then it was about a 15-minute drive to the Polish checkpoint, and there were no delays there. And we got through the Polish checkpoint pretty quick, and Polish people were beyond amazing. I mean, normally the Ukrainian would require visas to get in, but they weren't checking visas, they weren't checking COVID anything. We were never asked about a COVID test. We were never, they were welcoming everybody with open arms, and it was just amazing to see. There were people with big boxes of food just walking on our bus, handing diapers, food, taking care of everybody. So it was really, really awesome. Once we got through that point, a lot of the people who had been put on our bus got off and were taken to little camps there to be set up. But those of us who were actually ticketed went on to Warsaw. And from there, things started to feel normal again. The bus was moving. It wasn't packed. And it was just, by that point, we were so tired it was hard for anything to feel like a relief. But we were high-fiving and we were saying, we're in Poland. We're in Poland. And yeah, we got to a hotel and I was able to get an airline ticket bright and early the next morning. So we knocked out a couple hours of sleep and then headed over to the airport. So
you went to Poland without a flight, without a ticket?
Without a flight, without anything.
But you knew you could get it.
I didn't know, but we loved the food in Poland, so we knew we were going to get a hotel, and we knew the food was going to be good, and we were going to be okay at that point. So fortunately, we did get a flight right away, and we went to the airport and got our COVID test. That took a while, and I tried to exchange all my Ukrainian money, but at this point, it's about 60,000 worthless pieces of paper. It's not being traded. They wouldn't take it. So yeah, I've got a big pile of it here that is absolutely useless. So we'll see if it ever has use again, if there's going to be a Ukrainian bank or not. But yeah, from that point, we got on a plane and flew to Chicago, direct Warsaw to Chicago, and we landed at 7 p.m. and got to spend the night laying on a bench in Chicago airport because we weren't out till 7 a.m. the next morning. So, and from there we were in Denver by 9.
So you and your son just slept in the airport?
We tried. We tried. He didn't. He was up all night because it wasn't night for us.
Yeah.
We were still jet lagged, and that wasn't night for us. So, I tried to lay down, but I really couldn't sleep. I mean, it was. Yeah. So again, part of the experience of across that 100 hours I don't think I slept more than 2 or 3. Really, yeah, it was kind of that 12 hours in the Chicago airport was kind of a fitting end to the whole grueling experience, just sitting there overnight with everything closed in the entire airport. We just sit there for 12 hours.
So in all your military, how long were you in the military?
20 years.
20
Yeah,
years.
did my 20. Mm.
So does this compare to anything like that you experienced in the military? I mean, have you ever had anything like this?
Oh, I was a mathematician engineer in the military, and I was always U.S. stationed. So while I served through Afghanistan and Iraq, I was not deployed to there. So as far as yeah, this is more real than anything I ever experienced in my 20-year military career, by far.
What about your life? Your whole life?
Same. I grew up in Northeast Arkansas in a sheltered little bubble, and now granted, I had spent time. I've lived probably a year and a half in Russia. I lived 6 months or a year in Ukraine before. There was a time where I took a train from St. Petersburg to Kiev, and it cut through a corner of Belarus, and I didn't know it was going to cut through a corner of Belarus, and I didn't have a visa in Belarus, and I got kicked off the train in the middle of nowhere and told, good luck. You've got to go back, find your way. So that was traumatic, to get kicked off a train in the middle of Belarus, but I was never at risk of having a bomb fall on my head. So yeah, this was by far the most real traumatic thing that I had ever experienced. So.
And you shared it with your son.
I did. We were there to support each other the whole way through, and I mean, being a single dad, and we have a particular bond that you know is pretty deep. But I can say that only deepened it because we knew that we got lucky. We just talked last night about what would we be doing if we were still there. And would we be out of peanut butter yet? Would we be? How would our water be holding out? Yeah, we just talked about it last night about how this seems surreal. It seems like we should still be there. Yeah.
It's an amazing story.
Yeah, it's We were lucky. We were lucky.